What's up, everybody? Back from the holiday slumber here on GoJo and Golic, and we have a lot coming your way today. We'll check in on how everyone's Christmas and holiday was as we lead up to a new year, new us, and maybe a new NFL MVP in a conversation that is heating up across the league. Plus, as Christmas Day shines for the NFL, did the NBA bounce back as LeBron James and others make a statement about that league's favorite holiday? And it wouldn't be Christmas season without talking about bowl season, the Pop-Tarts Bowl as the shining star in bowl season. But did we get some interesting conversation and controversy out of Cam Ward and his second half no-show for the Miami Hurricanes? We'll talk about all that and more coming up today on GoJo and Golic. What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. here with you guys. Jesse Cofield still off enjoying some holiday, well-deserved time off and rest with her family. We got a great show coming up for everybody, as always. Download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give that gift to yourself and your friends in the new year. Marshall Newhouse going to join us, as he always does, former NFL offensive tackle and one of the co-hosts of the pregame power up here on DraftKings Network. Going to help us look ahead to Monday Night Football on hour number 2. But Dad, we are back from the holiday break. I know you actually worked last week. I have been off gallivanting. I'm still gallivanting, which is why you can see in my hotel background right now, I have got the tried and true for real hotel heads who know and want to keep the light out of their room, the hanger that's got the clips on the bottom here, keeping the blind shut in the background, as I am fresh off a wedding in Miami. Dad, I have never seen anything like this, as we will get to some of our holiday travels where I saw you. The wedding ceremony did not start, the ceremony, like the actual marrying of the bride and groom down here in Miami, until 7:30 at night on a Sunday. They did not cut the cake at the reception, I kid you not, until 2 in the morning. So if my voice sounds a little raspy, it's because I was out here trying to be a good wedding guest and make my presence felt. Yeah, insane.
No, that's no. If that's not immediate family, I'm not going. I'm saying, hey, sorry, good luck to you. I hope it all works out well. I'll send a gift. But yeah, the ceremony at 7:30 is already pushing it. But if you do that, you have to kind of speed up the process of dinner and the cake cutting and still kind of get everything in by midnight. I mean, that's crazy. I tell you what, you laid it on the line for going to that, because I would have politely declined.
Let me tell you what, I've come a long way since, for those of you who maybe have been around and listened to me for long enough to go back to the weekend observations days with Stu Gotts, where going to Prim Saripapat, our former colleague at ESPN's wedding, I actually missed our show the next morning because the wedding was a little bit too much fun, and our show was 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern on Sunday mornings, which is always a perilous spot to put it. And so the waters got introduced into the equation a lot earlier in the night, almost exclusively, so I could be with you here now, Dad, even though in addition to being down here in Miami and finishing off my travels, I was with you on the front end of this in South Bend when we saw Notre Dame win, when Penn State, when we got to go out there and cover that game there. And I saw you in Christmas in Boston, where you tell me this, because you and Mom have obviously enjoyed being grandparents, and so much of the holiday season is about family getting together. And, you know, we miss being on here with you guys, but it was fun to get to spend that time with everybody now. And Christmas is so different when you've got little kids that like the Santa Claus stuff, getting gifts, and start to actually get excited about things again, like hanging out with our, nieces and nephews and getting to watch them open presents and do stuff, and watch you and my nephew Jackson marvel at the same gifts really upped the wow factor of the holiday season.
Listen, there is nothing like, because obviously at a certain point when we had you kids, you and Jake and Sydney, you get to the point where Christmas takes on a different meaning. you know what I mean? You kind of lose the excitement factor of the fat man coming down the chimney. This was back to the pureness of it. Now, we have 3 grandkids. 2 really didn't know what were going on. Yeah. Baby Alex, Sydney and Ben's daughter, is a year old. And baby Jordan, Jake and Jenny's daughter, it was just a couple of weeks old. But Jackson was 2.5 years old. Jackson, he is right in the be good for Santa. Santa's going to bring gifts. And it is all worth it to see him come down the steps and to see him look at the presents, the John Mayer pink guitar that Santa left for him, and just to see that the joy in his eyes was worth everything, was worth seeing everybody, worth the travel, worth everything, just the joy of it. It was just fantastic. And we look forward to more of those, as we now have 3 grandkids that will soon be at the age where they'll be able to enjoy it. But yeah, it was great to have the families together, all be together, and B, just to see that the pure joy on a kid's face of what Santa left him is unmatched.
Well, let me talk about the pure joy on his face. And he's a very smart kid, so he's like some nerdy gifts that he got. And he got this globe that has a little marker on it that allows you to put the tip of the pen on any country, and it'll say the name of that country. You can switch it so it'll play the country's national anthem, which I started referring to as a fight song and feels good, and I might stick with that as a bit. It'll do capitals, all this information just by taking the electronic pen and touching it on the globe here. And he's already very smart, can name a bunch of the states. He's only like 2.5 years old, so we might have a little savant on our hands, but Dad was probably more impressed and enthralled with the globe. And so the joy for me in the holiday season was getting to watch the kids enjoy that, and then eventually all of us matriculate over, and just looking over at one point in the night as football's on, as plenty of other things are going along, and I see my dad so earnestly with that pen out, going and exploring the globe and probably learning more than you have since college by a country mile.
I was doing population. I was stunned at the populations of how small some countries were, but how many people they had. It was because, I know where the countries are, so I didn't need that part of the pen.
Some of them.
National anthems, well, maybe I did a little, but populations were really kind of mesmerizing me, and I didn't realize people were filming me doing this. I got this globe, and I'm putting the pen on different countries for population. Hey, you're never too old to learn. And you mentioned it with Jackson. I mean, we have a blank sheet with just the figures, the shapes of the states of the United States on it, and you point to one of the states, and he knows it. I mean, it's ridiculous. The dude was smarter than everybody in the room I mean, it was, Jake and Jenny are screwed of helping. Well, okay, all right. I know you and Ben were in the room. I get it.
I got a little ticked off when we're sitting there with the blank map of the U.S. and they're like, he could name more of the states than everyone in the room. It's like, all right, listen, I understand for the rest of y'all, that is a feat that is beyond your powers at this point. If you put me up against a 2.5-year-old, I love him to death. I will bury him with the blank state map. I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. And just because he's young doesn't mean I'm pulling punches now because the rest of you guys want to feign ignorance to make him feel good. He's smart enough to know on his own. And sometimes you got to learn. It's like you wouldn't have gone out on the, you and I, the tried and true long running bit for us was my dad, a former college wrestler who loves the sport, always said, when you're ready and you think you can take the crown, we'll go out and we'll wrestle. And you were never going to give that away all, it's like when people play pickup or whatever, fathers and sons, mothers and daughters passing that along. And so I had to go and beat your ass the old fashioned way on your lawn on Easter, my sophomore year of college in Willowick, Ohio, in front of your entire childhood neighborhood. You weren't going to just give that up. So why am I going to do that now with him naming states and capitals on this map just because you guys want to baby him?
Listen, okay. Hey, feel good about yourself. You're smarter than a 2.5-year-old. Hey, congratulations. You're the man. You and Ben are the men. Way to go. Because Ben kind of gave that look as well. Like we're like, dudes, he's 2.5. We're trying to pump him up here. And you guys are like getting all in your feels for it.
I'm just saying, if he wants to take the crown, he's going to have to step up and do it. To be the best, you got to be the best. And so we hope everyone had the best Christmas possible here. Clearly ours was entertaining enough around all of the football. We'll get to some of the Christmas Day stuff too. I thought Netflix did a really good job. Beyonce doing the halftime show of a game that wasn't the Super Bowl was insane to comprehend and does up some of the pressure on Kendrick Lamar, who I think is certainly ready for it. But Dad, speaking of pressure, there was plenty of it going into some playoff clinching scenarios this weekend for teams around the NFL. Everyone responded a little differently. Sunday Night Football last night, which thanks to some clock gaffes by Raheem Morris at the end of that game for the Atlanta Falcons, allowed that to get to overtime. The Washington Commanders end up winning and clinching their playoff spot. Just one of the many teams that have done it, Dad, but certainly culminating the season that Jaden Daniels and what they've been able to do there under him and Dan Quinn's tutelage. In year one, we looked out this year for who could possibly pull off the Houston Texans from last year. Now, apparently you'll have to try and avoid being the Houston Texans sophomore slump next year, but the Washington Commanders stepped up and did it. They're one of the teams that punched their ticket to the playoff here. How impressed have you been, Dad, overall by Jaden Daniels' rookie season?
Well, I mean, listen, 2 game-winning drives in the last 2 weeks against Philly and against Atlanta. I mean, how can you not be? I mean, they already have full confidence in whether he's throwing the ball or whether he's running the ball. And by the way, he runs the ball incredibly well, past Robert Griffin III for most rushing yards by a rookie. He has 30 combined touchdowns this year, tied with Russell Wilson for third most by a rookie quarterback. He has been outstanding. I talk about Brock Bowers, who has broken every tight end receiving record and receiving even for wide receivers as a rookie. And the big one was the yardage record by Mike Ditka, which he set in the 60s, that he beat that. But Jaden Daniels is the rookie of the year. I mean, it is and should be votes. Maybe he won't get votes, many votes, if at all, for MVP. But I mean, his year was amazing. Just his, and we talked about this in the beginning of the season, even in preseason. Or I know I did, his poise. I mean, nothing flusters him. It was kind of like C.J. Stroud last year as a rookie when he was having that great rookie year. Nothing affected him, and nothing affects Jaden Daniels. And now, listen, Atlanta had a chance. Michael Penix, he played well, had a touchdown pass. I think he was in the 50 percentile of completions. But, you can see it happening with him. It's just his second game. But, I mean, what was Raheem Morris doing at the end of that game? Man. I mean, there's a drive to kick the game-winning field goal. Penix completes a 25-yard pass to Darnell Mooney at the 44-yard line of Washington. There's 34 seconds left, and Atlanta has 2 timeouts, and they don't use one of them there. The next snap goes off at 17 seconds. They turn out they have to kick a 56-yarder, of which Riley Patterson is only his second week with the team, and as long as 53, and he has to kick a 56-yarder. starter, where if they used that timeout, they could have had another play or two to get closer. The kick was on line. The kick would have been good and fell like 4 or 5 yards short. So another play or so would have gotten them in position to get that win and keep control of their own destiny. But they blow the clock management there. Kudos to Jaden Daniels. Never gives Michael Penix in that Atlanta offense a chance in overtime. Drives it down because, remember, the rule is only for the postseason as far as even if you score a touchdown, the other team gets a chance, not the regular season. So Jaden Daniels said, no, we're going to end this, thrown to the old man Zach Ertz, who has a couple of touchdowns. And the domino effect, I normally call Sunday night games. I called the Saturday night game, Arizona at the Rams. And the Rams pulled one off by getting a pick when Arizona was about to go ahead with a leading touchdown with a few seconds to go. And so the Rams win that game, and then the Rams, by virtue of Washington winning, are in. It knocks Seattle out. So there's the whole domino effect of the playoff situation as well. So the Rams are now in because of the Washington win last night.
Yeah, we've got the playoff picture for the most part secure in the NFC. We'll get to that here in a second. But, Dad, you mentioned that clock gap at the end of the game and what it opened up the possibility for here. Who it really mattered for was Zach Ertz, who ends up catching the game-winning touchdown for the Commanders in overtime because of all that. And then because of that, triggers a $250,000 bonus for that being his 6th touchdown catch of the season. He also, with that catch, triggered another $250,000 bonus for going over 600 receiving yards this season. And then another $250,000 bonus for going over 60-plus catches this season. So that was a $750,000 catch in overtime, in addition to punching their ticket to the postseason. So pretty cool moment for Zach Ertz. I know we are long past National Tight End Day, but I feel like they'll lope that into the honors when they do. I'm sure their end of the season banquet that the tight ends are going to have by the time this is all said and done. But, Dad, you mentioned the playoff picture coming off this. The teams are now set for the NFC here. The only thing really up for grabs, there's a slim chance for the Falcons and the Buccaneers maybe going into next week, but the Buccaneers right now in pole position for that and the 4 seed. And then the 1 seed up for grabs going into week 18 is the Vikings and Lions will square off here. And the winner of that game not only, improves their playoff stock, becomes the 1 seed and gets the bye here. Yep. And so Vikings fans, I'll put my hand up on this one, Dad, and admit I was wrong here. Said the Vikings weren't on the same tier as the Lions and the Eagles a couple of weeks ago. I got hell in my mentions because of it. I deserved it here. Sam Darnold and company went out and absolutely baptized that Green Bay Packers team that I thought was going to be in their weight class and made them look like anything but in that game. Sam Darnold has continued his unbelievable renaissance season. He's been one of the most impressive quarterbacks in the sport this year and will likely remain a Minnesota Viking next year because of it, as they may have now, Dad, backdoored their way into what the Falcons were trying to do with Kirk Cousins, oddly enough, where you may have a quarterback that can be your veteran that allows J.J. McCarthy to learn for a little while there because of how well and how far he exceeded most people's expectations outside of that building. Kevin O'Connell, the odds-on favorite for MVP or Coach of the Year on DraftKings Sportsbook right now, was my prediction before the season, and overwhelmingly deserves it, Dad. What a job by them, as Minnesota now firmly in that conversation. I think that 3-team race atop the NFC that they absolutely deserve to be in. I am sorry, Vikings fans.
Yeah, listen, and Vikings, they were winning that game 27-10. Packers did come back, made it a 2-point game, made it somewhat exciting at the end for a game that the Vikings had dominated. But you're right, and I'm fortunate enough I get to call this game, so I'll be in Detroit on Sunday night for winner is the 1 seed, loser is the 5 seed. It's that simple. And as far as the NFC South, Atlanta lost control. Atlanta plays Carolina, Tampa Bay plays New Orleans. It's simple. Tampa Bay wins, they're in. Tampa Bay loses, and Atlanta wins, they're in. There's no wild card. There's only the NFC South that's up for grabs. And in the AFC, the only spot left is that last spot. If Denver wins, they're in. And they play, I believe they play Kansas City, who is playing for nothing.
Yeah.
If Miami wins and Denver loses, Miami is in. If Cincinnati wins, they need Denver and Miami to lose to be in. So there's 3 teams vying for it. Denver in the post position there. If they win, they're in.
Yeah, and listen, I know a lot of people are out there saying, hey, if you're Kansas City, would you almost want to lose this game so that you don't have to face Joe Burrow? I promise you, they're not all that worried about facing this year's Cincinnati Bengals defense. Now, that offense is absolutely a shredder, and we know that they have been a team that pushed Kansas City early in this season, is one of the only two quarterbacks, Joe Burrow and Tom Brady, to beat Patrick Mahomes in the postseason. But, Dad, this is still a Bengals team that's an uphill battle. I do think, there's a chance that the Chiefs, they should rest the vast majority of their starters. It would only be if they want to get them some light work, before the layoff they have being the 1 seed. But the Denver Broncos could absolutely win that game, knowing they are incredibly motivated and the Chiefs are going to be riding mostly backups.
Oh, they absolutely can. And Kansas City is going to rest. Andy Reid is a rest his players coach, where Bill Belichick wasn't. In New England, Bill Belichick played his guys at least for some of the time, some of the starters. Andy Reid, I believe, is going to rest them, and I have zero problem with that. You do what's right for you, because I'm sure Cincinnati and Miami will be screaming for Kansas City to play a game, and try and beat Denver so they have a chance. But Kansas City has earned the right to sit the players they want to sit, getting the 1 seed.
A wild Week 18 full of scoreboard watching on deck. All we could ask for after a slate this weekend that was only moderately entertaining. Coming up next, though, we'll get to some entertaining sounds from over the weekend and the NFL MVP race that has quickly become one of the most exciting in recent memory. Next on GoJo and Golic. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Dad, it officially happened over the Christmas break. The Chiefs put the fear of God back into all of us, right? That was all it was really going to take, was this stretch. We talked about 3 games in 11 days, and we thought for sure any of these pass rushers from Houston or the Steelers would all be the thing that finally ended this run where the Chiefs had flown so close to the sun. And instead, they went out there and put it on the Steelers pretty enthusiastically here. Marquise Brown comes back. Things are starting to look a little bit more whole at the right time. Joe Thuney, can we give some love? We'll talk about 15. We'll talk about all the these other guys. What Joe Thuney has done, going from being just an all-pro left guard, ho-hum, for one of the best interior offensive lines in the NFL, but just casually sliding out to left tackle in the middle of this endless cycle of bodies at that spot that either haven't been healthy or haven't been effective, and just transition down. Listen, he is getting help, and the Chiefs need to do more of this. I saw Jeff Schwartz say this, and he's absolutely right. The Chiefs need to help their actual tackles the way they have been helping their guard turn tackle with some of the guys in chipping and the formations and the different things that they have done. But Joe Thuney has held it down out there, and it has made all the difference in the world, Dad, for this Chiefs team that now once again looks like, hey, okay, we can count on them to be the Super Bowl favorite based on them rounding into form predictably the way they always seem to do down the home stretch.
Yeah, if you break down his size, his arm, his reach, and all that, it doesn't fit an offensive tackle stereotype for sure. But he's getting, and when he first had to go in there during the season, he did struggle a bit, but he has really, really picked up the slack. And like you said, they're giving him help, and that's no dishonor for a tackle going out to or for a guard going out to tackle and needing a little bit of help. But he has really steadied it there because they picked up DJ Humphries, a tackle that got cut from Arizona. But in the first game he started, he hurt his hamstring. So, Thuney just had, and I'm sure Thuney was like, thank God I can go back to guard. But now he's out on an island, and you're right. He deserves credit. He is doing a hell of a job.
It was when I went to rookie training camp with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'll never forget the cold dread in my heart when I looked up on the board. I had been a center and guard my whole college career, and then all of a sudden on the depth chart for rookie minicamp, I see my name out at right tackle. The change in everything out there, the way you've got to do things technically, your aiming points, spatial awareness, all this stuff can be a nightmare, even for the best guys in the NFL. We've talked about that transition from the exterior to the interior. Going the other way is like being dropped in the middle of a highway during rush hour traffic when stuff's just moving around you. And so he has made that look completely effortless for a team that, I don't know about you, Dad, to me, that goes back to being like, all right, there's a reason why I'm going to never pick against them when it comes postseason time, because in addition to being an incredibly efficient third down team, Patrick Mahomes battling through this ankle injury and still being mobile enough to hurt you, the defense rounding into form more and making plays in that front seven, it just feels like, okay, they're the same Chiefs that we expected to really push for a three-peat all season long. It took them a long time to get there. It was not the easiest path by any means, but they are here right now and ready to go.
Oh, they absolutely are. We kept saying they can't keep winning by one score. They can't keep winning by one score. And they've stopped winning by one score. They're winning by a couple of scores. But they're just, you're right. You kind of throw up your hands and say, listen, you get the benefit of the doubt every year because of the way you're playing. It's like we would give Patrick Mahomes the benefit of the doubt of possibly being an MVP candidate because he's Pat Mahomes. Now, not so much this year as we're going to get into, but yeah, Kansas City deserves all the love they're going to get, and it certainly seems that the most competition is going to come from either Buffalo or Baltimore as we get closer to the playoffs.
Yeah, and they're certainly both potent enough teams to absolutely have a shot at this, and you're right about the Mahomes MVP situation there. I'm sorry. I think I just burped into the microphone. That's a fine. The Mahomes MVP situation, I was trying to think as we were getting ready for the show today, because the MVP race in the NFL has quickly become one of the most compelling conversations in sports, genuinely. And I know MVP is always just something that feels really subjective because how we define MVP seems different every year and the standards and yada, yada. But man, we have got an exciting race heating up. And I was coming here today going, all right, the Chiefs have lost one game this season. They're the 1 seed again. And Patrick Mahomes has steadied this roster through a sea of changes and tumult, both in the exterior of the offensive line, the wide receiver room, the defense lost bodies. Chris Jones was hurt down the stretch of the season. And could he be in there? And Dad, I don't think even by Mahomes standard, this is anywhere near his best season, even if he has been the glue that's allowed this all to happen. It's been a struggle at times for him too, because of those other factors there. But it's just sort of maybe the Jordan or LeBron effect too, where we're so numb for so long. But this Chiefs team, Dad, really does seem to me about the continuity and buy-in across the board. Andy Reid does as good a job as any coach that has ever coached the sport. And this is the Belichickian thing too of, hey, this is your specific job job on the team. The wide receiver room's got a million different flavors of ice cream. The defense has a bunch of guys that fit perfectly into what they're asked to do by Spags. And so this really does seem to be as much a holistic team effort, even if it only works because you've got a couple of guys like him and Chris Jones that when they're on the field do make the job of everybody else easier by being great.
Yeah. Yeah, this even by, like you said, by Mahomes' standards, not one of his better years. He's not going. This is a two-person race, and quite honestly, Mahomes gets mentioned every year, but obviously it's Lamar and Josh Allen. But man, because it's usually one of the top teams. How about Joe Burrow? I mean, for a team that may not make the playoffs, Joe Burrow has 42 touchdowns and just 8 interceptions. And quite honestly, if Baker Mayfield had fewer interceptions, Baker's name should be in this as well for what Tampa Bay is doing and the run that they're on. But Joe Burrow, I mean, I know this normally goes to a division winning and one of the better teams, and Joe Burrow's on a team that probably won't make the playoffs. But my God, what a year he has had.
No, it's been an incredible season, and you're right, unfortunately, because he came out and said, I think we're the best offense in the NFL, and there's really no one that can argue with them at this point. Yeah. What he's had to shoulder in terms of the load of the defense that is entirely underwhelmed this season. Dad, if they were to make the playoffs, which it doesn't look like they are going to right now, it'd be a long shot, but if they were to, he'd have a legitimate claim to that. It's kind of like, I mean, honestly, Dad, you haven't mentioned the guy you talked about in this. To me, Joe Burrow and Saquon Barkley sort of in the same vein where it feels like Joe Burrow, even if they snuck in the playoffs, it would be a long shot. He's kind of done what Josh Allen did last year with fewer interceptions in dragging a team from anonymity into the playoffs after a really rough start to the season. And then Saquon Barkley, very much in line to have a shot at breaking Eric Dickerson's rushing record going into week 18. Now, in a difficult spot because you don't know what to do. The Eagles' playoff spot pretty secure. Do you go out here and put him at risk before a postseason where you could very easily win a Super Bowl? Because, Dad, you were saying if he were to break that record, you don't know how you don't give him the MVP. So does that still hold for you?
If I had a vote, if he broke the record, I would give him the MVP. He needs 101 yards, I believe. Yeah. To break the record. I think that's where he's at. And here's the thing, because there are those that will say, well, he had an extra game over Eric Dickerson. If you look at the year Eric Dickerson got the record, obviously it was one less game, but he had 379 carries. Eric Dickerson, you look at his carries back when it was a running league, there were years he had over 400 carries. But I think in the year he set the record, he had 379 carries. Saquon Barkley is not going to equal that. Saquon Barkley has 345 carries. Now, I guess he could if they really try and get him to the record and he's not getting many yards and he runs for 30 or 35 attempts. But if he were to break it, he'd probably do it with less attempts than Eric Dickerson, even though there's one more game. Because that one more game does matter. But sure. And how about Eric Dickerson saying, yeah, if he gets it, I'll congratulate him, but I don't want the record broken. I'm cool with that. I'm fine with that. Listen, I wouldn't want – I had the fastest pin in wrestling history of Notre Dame wrestling. I didn't want that broken. But if somebody broke it, I would congratulate them and say, hey, nice job. But I don't have to sit there and want my record broken, just like Eric Dickerson doesn't want his record broken. But Saquon Barkley, listen, he could. And what poetic justice if he does it. They're playing the Giants. I mean, that if he got the record, playing against his former team would be amazing. But though it's tough to deny Lamar Jackson. His stats are better than last year when he won MVP. But it might be Lamar fatigue, and that might be why Josh Allen wins it.
Yeah, it would be really interesting because I would have no problem with that if Lamar Jackson won it. And quite honestly, if I had a vote right now, he would probably get it considering what he's put on this season. Yep. To your point, he is improved in every way possible statistically over last year's MVP season. He's got them once again in contention here. They're in the 3 seed now. If they lose and Pittsburgh wins, they could flip-flop and Pittsburgh could go back to winning that division and they would be in at the wild card. But we're talking about a team with, potentially 11 or 12 wins getting into the postseason. So while they're not the 1 seed like they were last year, there are plenty of very coherent arguments for Lamar Jackson to be the MVP, and I would not fight you on it. The weird thing to me, Dad, has been watching Lamar Jackson defenders look at Josh Allen's resume this year and try to do to it what people did to Lamar Jackson's 2023 MVP resume. Well, remember, Lamar Jackson wasn't leading the league in any statistical category as a passer last season. When he won, the whole crux of his MVP argument was, hey, they're the best team in football. They're the 1 seed in the AFC. They've been a phenomenal story all year. And if you watch the games, there are few people that impact the sport the way that Lamar Jackson does. That's a lot of the Josh Allen argument for this season, saying, hey, we know they've got lesser weapons on offense. They let Steph Diggs go. They put more on his plate. And while they're not the 1 seed right now, they're solidified as the 2 seed. They won 13 games. And if Patrick Mahomes and the greatest modern dynasty post-Patriots that we'll see didn't exist, they would be the 1 seed. And this could be a very different conversation. So it was just weird to me, Dad, to see everyone all of a sudden go back and try and just stat Josh Allen out of this as if the guy hasn't beaten the Chiefs and the Lions this year in really impressive games, had a 6 touchdown performance out here, gone out and now accounted for more than 40 touchdowns in the season again this year. He is one of 2 NFL quarterbacks in history with 40 or more touchdowns in 5 or more seasons in a row. That goes along with Aaron Rodgers, who ironically enough, they stomped out yesterday. So I can understand the arguments for Lamar Jackson to win, but using that as a reason for Josh Allen to lose seems weird to me.
What about, because Lamar Jackson accounted for 43 touchdowns, Josh Allen 40 touchdowns. I mean, they're both deserving. What about the thought of Lamar fatigue, that Lamar has 2 already, Josh doesn't have 1, and the stats are close enough to swing it Josh Allen's way? You know, we ran into the Michael Jordan fatigue in the NBA. You know, with the MVP, it's like, God, do we got to give it to him again? He probably deserves it, but let's go another route. Again, these are human voters who vote for this. So I wonder what the Lamar fatigue, which is odd because, again, his stats were better, but Josh Allen has been a monster with 12 rushing touchdowns to Lamar's 4. But Lamar has 11 more touchdown passes. So I could go either way. I would probably go Lamar, but I really wonder if the Lamar fatigue will be a real thing to voters.
Yeah, it's weird because Lamar Jackson, I would say this year, has a better claim to the MVP than he did last year, right? Because this year's team, while the defense as of late against some lesser competition, once they move some guys around, or Darius Washington's played great, Kyle Hamilton back at safety the way everyone's noted, Lamar Jackson and the offense have largely had to carry the day in a season where the Achilles heel has been, hey, if you can pass it deep, our defense is open for business. And so you couple that with by far his best season and most accomplished season as a passer top to bottom. And I would say if you were comparing last year and this year, this one would be the season I would point to and say, yeah, that guy's the MVP more. It just so happens that the Bills did the thing that we have seen teams like the Kansas City Chiefs do in the past, where it's, we believe we have got one of the truly special quarterbacks. We have Jason Fitz on here all the time who said Buffalo believed they could get Josh Allen to account for X amount of touchdowns on his own. And while they did have to go and get Amari Cooper at some point, and he has a big day and another touchdown catch this weekend, it's still an offense that seems to largely exist because you've got a full-grown football playing moose in the backfield there that can help you get the job done. And so, again, I know it's like the easy cop-out sports talk answer, but I would have no issue with either of them winning at this point.
So who would you vote for? If you had a vote, like you have a Heisman vote, you have an MVP vote, who are you voting for? I'm voting for Lamar.
I would vote for Lamar Jackson. I do think for all the reasons that we underscored there, it's not just statistical either. Watch the games, and Lamar Jackson extending plays for 7 or 8 seconds, buying time and finding guys down the field. He is such a unique talent at the position, impacts the game in such a unique way, the way Josh does, and he's had to carry, I think, a lot of the load as well, even though we know Derrick Henry is in that backfield. Food for thought, the NFL MVP has only been split twice in history, 1997 with Barry Sanders and Brett Favre, and 2003 with Peyton Manning and Steve McNair. So I don't know if we will get the full Mean Girls splitting up of the crown on the stage to give it out to these guys, but it is at least something that's happened here in Food for Thought. We'll get back with more NFL talk here next on GoJo Golic. All right, coming up in hour number 2, we will get to an interesting question that came up through the course of bowl season. Miami's star quarterback Cam Ward played in their game in the Pop-Tart Bowl against Iowa State, but only in the first half of that game. Ended up sitting out a second half where Miami ultimately goes on to lose, and a lot of people now asking questions about that decision, both from Cam Ward's side and from Miami's side, to have him go out there and break an all-time ACC passing record, kind of similar to the conundrum the Eagles are going to go through with Saquon Barkley here in Week 18, and trying to potentially eclipse Eric Dickerson's record, but also gaming this out for a postseason where you want not only Saquon, but the other Eagles starters healthy. So we'll get to that question in a little bit. I'm fascinated by the reaction I have seen to the Cam Ward situation. That's not actually all that unfamiliar, but at this level, still very new to bowl season and the way that we've seen it. But Dad, it's time to get to some sounds that we heard from over the weekend. It's Mic'd Up Monday here on GoJo and Golic. And let's start this off with a Minnesota Vikings team that got awful rowdy this weekend. Great postseason locker room celebration scene for Sam Darnold and company after they go and emphatically mark their place in the NFC North, getting ready to do battle with the Detroit Lions. Here was their head coach, Kevin O'Connell, after the game.
Your quarterback went 33 and 43 for 377 and 3 touchdowns. I'm not done. Just set the team record for most passing touchdowns in his first season with 35. Just set his career highs for passing yards and completions in a game when we had to have it. And most importantly, team record for most wins as a starting quarterback, 14.
Hey, man, it doesn't get much better than what the Vikings have curated in that locker room. The NFC North, you could argue, has two of the healthiest and most enviable locker rooms in the sport between the Vikings and the Lions, Dad. But Kevin O'Connell and the job that him and Sam Darnold have done coming together, figuring this thing out, and having a prolific season where they now still have a shot at the 1 seed going into Week 18, it has been remarkable. Again, I raise my hand and apologize for not giving the Vikings the respect that they deserve. Sam Darnold believers out there are getting to kick their feet up and tell everyone I told you so, that in the right settings, this guy that was an insane talent coming out of USC all those years ago could go and thrive, and Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings proved it, man. How impressed have you been by this guy?
Well, a few weeks ago, I even said on the show that I wasn't sure if Sam Darnold, if he would go to the level of water that he had been. And as I said, I'm calling the game Sunday night, and I go on the field before the game. I'm going to go up to Sam and apologize to him. Sam, sorry I doubted you, man. I mean, dude is absolutely playing some ball, which is going to really, I mean, what a position he put himself in as far as at the end of the year. Let's go past the run of whatever they're going to do. And does Minnesota want him back? Do they make it a Green Bay Packers situation where your first-round pick and J.J. McCarthy now is going to sit for a couple of years? Do they try and sign him to a shorter-term deal? Or does somebody else go for a long-term deal? I mean, dude has put himself in a great situation, and he's in a great situation with a great receiver, a hell of a coach, and Kevin O'Connell, as you said, could be up for Coach of the Year. So he's in a great situation, so you wonder if he would leave it for more money or stay there knowing that eventually J.J. McCarthy would take the job. But in the now, he has just been, I mean, what he's gone through and where he is has been incredible. You know, you have an aggressive defense who has struggled a bit at times, but it's an aggressive defense. And the offense, obviously, you have the best, if not in the team picture, the best receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson, and a quarterback playing out of his mind. So what a game I'm looking forward to Sunday night.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've got maybe the crown jewel of the back half of this season altogether. Very excited for that one. But, it is beyond impressive what they've done. I know Dan Quinn's going to have a certain argument to this too for what he's done with Washington this season. But man, you'd be hard pressed to pry that Coach of the Year award out of Kevin O'Connell's hands if I had any say or any vote for that award here. If this was a prior world where we were still doing this, Dad, Sam Darnold, very reminiscent to like the Geno Smith comeback player of the year season, where he just went and after being a backup for a whole bunch of years, ironically enough, like Geno and leaving the Jets, went out here and had this insane, his most productive season as a pro by far. I don't think there's any way he is not a Minnesota Vikings starting quarterback come the beginning of next season, Dad. I think they make it work. I think he makes it work. I think there is a very clear runway for the next 2 to 3 years where he can absolutely be their starter while J.J. McCarthy recovers from surgery, gets full off seasons under his belt, has time to grow in that spot. But I don't know why you'd forsake what they've got now to try and roll the dice again, unless behind the scenes J.J. McCarthy is Patrick Mahomes like we've talked about. I think you found your quarterback for the immediate future.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree in letting Sam kind of run the course here. But it will be interesting of how long a deal Minnesota offers. And is it, would Sam be smarter staying in the system than he is instead of chasing money? Because he'd probably get offered more money somewhere else and more years somewhere else and more guaranteed money probably somewhere else. But that'll be an interesting situation, which they're happy to wait for and determine after Minnesota makes their playoff run.
I think Sam has been around long enough and on enough teams to know that what he's got here is a little bit different than what everyone else is working with there. And that includes right now the ultimate opposite of this vibes-wise here. Let's go over to the New York Jets that had one of the most interesting situations this weekend as they are getting blasted by the Buffalo Bills. Aaron Rodgers, of all people, off an interception, actually gets flagged for unnecessary roughness. And even the official that you'll hear here could not keep a straight face as he had to go and call this penalty.
14 touchdowns.
Personal foul, unnecessary roughness.
On Rodgers?
Offense, number 8.
He laughed.
15-yard penalty.
I saw that.
From the other run. First down, Buffalo.
He's like, I've never called a late hit on the quarterback the opposite way. How about that?
And you know what? The game dad's still somewhat in reach at this point. I'm glad everyone involved, including Aaron Rodgers, could laugh at how ridiculous that was. Although this game, no laughter by the end of it as the Jets get absolutely railroaded here. And Aaron Rodgers actually at one point goes up to the coach and says, hey, is it about time we put Tyrod Taylor in? This is Aaron Rodgers talking about that after the game.
What was the conversation like with Jeff when he took you out of the game? What were your thoughts on that?
I mean, it was 33-0. We were sitting there, and I said at some point, probably go to Tyrod here, huh? And then the next play, they threw a screen for a touchdown, so it's 40-0.
Dad, so where are you at on that? Obviously, everything Aaron Rodgers does is going to be a lightning rod. This season is a lost cause for the Jets, and the conversation's more existential here. But where are you at on a quarterback pulling himself out at the end of a blowout?
Listen, I mean, it's Aaron Rodgers, so we're really not shocked at anything he says or he does. I'm fine with it. We've seen this happen before, whether it's a player saying it or a coach doing it in a blowout, pulling the starting quarterback out. So I in all honesty, I didn't really think much of it. It didn't really affect me one way or the other, but it just solidified. Well, I didn't need solidifying. It was already solidified. Just how horribly wrong this experiment has gone for the Jets. Last year, you could at least say, well, the guy we pinned our hopes on got hurt 4 plays into the season, so we have this year, and it has gone so horribly wrong. There is going to be such a reset for the Jets from the top on down on this team, from obviously GM to coach to players. It could look like an absolute brand new team except for Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, and then a couple of the defenders like Sauce Gardner and a couple of the brothers Williams on defense. It's going to be such a different team.
Yeah, you know Aaron Rodgers is not going to be your starting quarterback anymore. Maybe he is there as a mentor. Maybe he's not. We have no idea. But this is really one of those, like, I don't even want to be around anymore moments for Aaron Rodgers and the entire Jets roster that at some point in the middle of that ass beating, Dad, as someone who's, we've all been a part and you played the sport long enough, the receiving end of one of those belt to ass moments. And you have a lot of time to contemplate things on the sideline. But in that moment with Aaron Rodgers, that part is not something that is going to, in the sea of weird moments with him this season, trouble me in the slight. If anything, he was helping Old out a little bit, who I'm sure still has a lot on his plate as someone that's the interim head coaching role there. Aaron's just letting him know, hey, this is probably about the time that we would do this in the normal scenario here, and helping him continue to get the reps while he's at the helm there. So just another in a sea of ugly moments for the Jets this season. The Buffalo Bills looked dominant in that game yesterday, which was no surprise given the level of talent and competition. They're one of those teams, them, Kansas City, Baltimore at the top of the AFC, that really we seem to have kind of that trio of teams on both sides of the NFL that seem like they are a class above everybody else in terms of the postseason. And they're certainly one of them. But Dad, we mentioned some of the unique things about Week 18 here. That's a little bit of scoreboard watching for some teams out here. And Calais Campbell, who has now hit the journeyman portion of his career helping out the Miami Dolphins, talked about who he will be rooting for down the stretch here as they cling to some slim playoff hopes.
Thing is that, some stuff fell in place for us, so we got a shot. I don't know what the percentage is. It really don't matter. I just know that for the first time in my life, I'm about to be a big Chiefs fan for at least a week. A huge Chiefs fan. I don't know, what Andy Reid's going to do with his players and, all that, but I know that in football, it's nice to have a shot.
Dad, I'll say this, Week 18 and the end of the NFL seasons before when it was Week 17 brings about two things that I really enjoy that are great subplots. One is everybody chasing bonuses in their contracts, where you'll see teams that are even out of it here who know guys are near some of those incentives, like we talked about with Zach Ertz before, and are just feeding guys the pill, trying to get them to the point where they can get those triggers in their contracts. And the other one is the scoreboard watching that goes on. We famously saw Buffalo years ago when they were getting ready to break their playoff drought, I believe, watching on the screen in the stadium. Some teams will really lean into it like that, but when other teams have to rely on guys and start to really look around like that, becomes really fun for me, because at that point those teams are just like us at home, sitting here watching someone else with their happiness and their future in their hands.
So again, the last wild card spot is between Denver, Miami, and Cincinnati. It's very easy for Denver. They win, they beat Kansas City, they're in. If Denver loses and Miami beats the Jets, Miami is in. If Cincinnati wins and they play the Steelers, Denver and Miami both have to lose for Cincinnati to be in. So Cincinnati has the longest road to try and get in. And for those that are saying, for the competitive nature of it, Kansas City should play their players, that's BS. I mean, they have earned the right. This is like call-ups late in a baseball season when teams that need a win or need a certain team to win as they're sitting there and scoreboard watching, and that team has a bunch of call-ups to try and see what they can do. I'm like, hey, you put yourself in that position. So when you have to rely on somebody else, you have no say in the matter. You don't get to complain that they should play their starters. They should try and win the game. You don't get to do that. You just get to sit back and scoreboard watch it. And I'm not saying Calais Campbell didn't do that. He just said he's going to be a Chief fan. But for those saying, oh, the Chiefs should play to their max capability, that's BS. That's ridiculous. You have earned that right. So if they want to sit everybody and get smoked in this game because of it, so be it. That's the way it goes, and Miami will suffer the consequences because of it, but that's the situation they're in.
Yeah, every once in a while we get a little bit too galaxy brain on the outside of these locker rooms, and the further away you get from the game, it's like, yeah, no, the Chiefs don't owe anybody anything in terms of going out there and competing because the sake of competition. And on the other side, they're also not going to intentionally throw the game to avoid having to play the Cincinnati Bengals or anything like that matchup wise. This is like the conversation that we have about tanking, quite honestly, where tanking that goes on, it's because the organization intentionally puts bad players or players that are outside of their weight class out on the field in situations that they won't be able to succeed in. The players are never actually throwing it. This is another one of those spots where they're not trying to game the system in that way. They're trying in that locker room. The myopic focus on what we've got to do to win means that they are going to focus on what do we need to do to be the best, healthiest version of ourselves going into the next time we play football.
That's exactly right. No matter what sport it is, you're responsible for your team and getting your team ready for the postseason, however you deem necessary. Remember, we talked about earlier, Bill Belichick played starters in the last game when they had things wrapped up. Andy Reid sits starters, and he's going to sit guys, but you've earned that right. So, yeah, no complaining, don't want to hear anything, and then we let it all play out.
Yes, and we all get to play it out. It's nice having a couple of things in balance for Week 18 that we will get to watch for, and we will get to try and root for, like Calais Campbell and the Miami Dolphins, looking out and watching other teams hold their future in their hands, which is a tough spot to be in, but them's the breaks. Coming up next, we will do start or sit and figure out rest versus rust with our buddy Marshall Newhouse when he joins us for a little bit of playoff experience talk next on GoJo and Golic. All right, before we get to Super Bowl champion and NFL veteran offensive tackle Marshall Newhouse in hour number 2, it's time to get to DraftKings crowning moments here to finish off hour number 1. Shout out to Sam Hatchie. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing your name right, but I will get your winnings correctly here. His Instagram sent in this big winner from the NFL slate this weekend, an 8-leg anytime touchdown parlay that cashed him out $24,681 off a $10 wager that included scores from Jacoby Myers, Brian Thomas, James Cook, Garrett Wilson, Jonathan Taylor, a huge day from Malik Neighbors, and Mike Evans. Crowning Moments is presented by DraftKings. Submit your winning bets for a chance to be featured. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Congratulations to Sam on the big win. We'll get a big win for our show when Marshall Newhouse joins us next. All right, welcome back. Hour number 2 here at GoJo Golic. Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. Jesse Cofield still off enjoying the holidays today. We will get to the conundrum for the Miami Hurricanes star quarterback Cam Ward and bowl season review in general for college football, as now we are on the march towards the quarterfinal round of the college football playoff coming up in the middle of this week here. But since we are down one of our friends today, we invited another in here, former NFL offensive tackle and Super Bowl champion Marshall Newhouse, kind enough to join us here, help get you guys ready for Monday Night Football, the pregame power up 6 p.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, along with Trey Wingo, Claudia Bellafato, Emerson Lazia. A great crew there. But Marshall, how you holding up, man? How was the holidays for you?
Holidays have been good. I've been traveling like I know you are accustomed to during the holidays, calling some bowl games. But I feel the spirit, especially last night in the airport, watching some of the end of these games. The NFL has decided to save its best for last, so I'm up for it.
Yeah, and speaking of speaking of best for last, I mean, we were discussing the MVP race between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, and I said I would vote for Lamar Jackson right now, but I also said if Saquon Barkley breaks Eric Dickerson's record, he's my MVP. Where do you stand on it?
Listen, man, as a lineman who appreciates what running backs do, the great ones do, I feel for Saquon. Ultimately, I think the two quarterbacks have kind of separated themselves, especially not having as much talent as Saquon has around him. But the 2,000 yards is insane in 2024. I had Josh Allen for the longest time. Listen, every time we see one of these guys play, they make an argument for them to be the guy. And so I get the jockeying for position. But for me, it's still Josh Allen, given what he is pulling across the finish line in Buffalo. But, I mean, I wouldn't be mad if any of the three guys got it, truly.
We know for both of the guys that we're talking about from the quarterback portion of this, their job this postseason is to slay their postseason dragons. We know Lamar Jackson for a long time has had to beat back this postseason narrative. And for me, the Josh Allen led Bills have had a Chiefs problem here. So, Marshall, based on what we saw through the Christmas slate from the Chiefs, are they back to being the team that everybody fears going into the postseason, closing the season on a strong note?
Yeah, listen, I talked about it week after week after week because, yes, they were eking out wins, and you could say they were objectively less impressive than past years, but there's just this sense that they are doing what they need to do because they're a veteran-led unit with a lot of experience, a lot of know-how. Would they have liked to have won some of those games by a larger margin? Yeah, but they're doing it with not their full talent of guys week after week. The 1 week they get most of their weapons, basically all the weapons back, Pat Mahomes throws for 300+ and multiple touchdowns against a playoff caliber team in Pittsburgh. And so now they've got 3 weeks off to rest and recover. And I just don't think anyone wants to see them in the playoffs because they're at full strength. And now they've basically won close games. The things that playoffs are meant to do is to show who can win close games. They've done that all season with less than their full caliber of guys.
They're used to being at home during the playoffs. Last year they went on the road in the playoffs and they won. Now they're back at home again. We think it's a 3-team race in the AFC with Kansas City, Buffalo, and Baltimore. Who do you think can challenge Kansas City the most, Buffalo, Baltimore, or do you think another team can?
Listen, out of those top three, I don't think there's a team that's currently in the playoff race that I think will truly scare one of those teams to make a run. But the one team that nobody wants to see right now, despite all of their defensive shortcomings, is Joe MFN Burrow. The way that he's playing football, all the way to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, like they've already beat these guys. They've already shown that we aren't scared of you. Their defense has not been up to snuff this year. That's the reason they're on the outside looking in right now. But after that game against Denver and the way that he's been playing at what we can say is an MVP caliber, I think the only reason he's not in that conversation is because it's just we have a hard time giving that award to a guy who's not pulling his team to the top of the standings. But his numbers suggest he's playing the best out of all the quarterbacks right now.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. It's very reminiscent of Josh Allen last season pulling that Bills team out of a 500 record and into the playoff conversation. I want to stick in the AFC North and go to the other team we talked about from that Kansas City and Steelers matchup on Christmas. The Pittsburgh Steelers, like you said, still in the playoffs here, do still have a chance of winning the division if things go their way in week 18, but seem to have hit a bit of a ceiling here. Marshall, we know last year there was some outcries about Mike Tomlin and what this team has become. Above 500 as the hallmark, making the playoffs every year, but how warranted is frustration among Steelers fans in feeling like they're not aiming high enough in terms of the aspiration or their expectations for the season at this point?
Listen, I've been a guy who's touted Mike Tomlin's consistency over the years. It is something to be applauded, but I get the Steelers, especially such a proud fan base, wanting the team in position to make runs. And it does feel like they've bumped their heads up against the ceiling this year. And ultimately, that's just a QB problem because their defense at times is pretty dominant. And so that's a defense that you feel like you can win a playoff style of game with. But even in Russ's high of highs this year, you're left wanting a little bit more on offense. I mean, George Pickens is a guy who's very mercurial, can make the incredible plays, but he's such a young guy. He's so, unpredictable as far as what you will get from him week to week. Najee Harris is a guy who you just feel like he's just like a couple long runs away from being like a guy you can depend on as a bell cow back, but he doesn't show enough. They've got Freiermuth, and they've got an offensive line that struggles at times, but other times they keep the QB clean. So there's just little moments of this team that you're like, they are very close, but they don't feel like they're squeezing everything they can out of it. And is that a Mike Tomlin thing? Ultimately, this is a quarterback-driven league. He has responsibility in picking the quarterback, and I think he made the right decision in going Russ over Fields, which a lot of people doubted. But they don't have a guy like everyone else does who's in contention, who's a quarterback who you're like, all right, give me the ball. Even with Russ's Super Bowl caliber history, give me the ball and give it to our offense with the last possession, and we'll go win you the game.
So in the AFC, we like Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore. You said, hey, if Cincy gets in, nobody wants to play them. The NFC, it's kind of a three-team race as well: Detroit, Minnesota, and Philadelphia. Outside of those three teams, because we know they're the top three teams, what team is like the Cincinnati, but maybe on the outside looking in, or maybe in the playoffs, but is that kind of uh-oh team you may watch out for?
Yeah, I mean, for a while there, we thought it was Green Bay, but they're now 0-5 against the top teams in the NFC, and they just haven't shown this ability to get over that hump and for Jordan Love to take them over that hump. But for me, it's, again, Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Catching them in a wild card game, man, anything can happen. They can put up points with the best of them, and it just depends on what week you catch them. But him and Mike Evans have just incredible rapport. Mike Evans, one of the most consistent guys that we don't talk about, who's going to be a Hall of Famer in the NFL. And Baker can turn it on, and their offensive line's played really well this year. Their defense has come on in spurts. They just re-signed Shaq Barrett for a little pass rushing edge. So in a one-game playoff scenario, listen, Tampa Bay is absolutely a team that can throttle you and kind of jump on you real quick, a la last season with Baker.
Yeah, I think for a while we talked about on this show, we thought it was going to be the Los Angeles Rams, but since that massive scoring output against Buffalo now, the Rams are on an 11 games without scoring in the first quarter and have failed to eclipse 20 points in their last three outings. So that offense that was firing on all cylinders for one game starting to slow a little bit. So I'm with you. I think you give the edge to Baker Mayfield, who outside of the turnovers, which we know is a big factor, playing some phenomenal football in an offense that can absolutely scare the hell out of you there. Let's go to the top of that conference, though. Dad mentioned the three teams that we've kind of talked about as in that top shelf of the NFC class. How do you order them at this point, looking ahead to the Detroit Lions as a part of this Monday Night Football outing and knowing the way injury has snuck up there, injury for the Eagles at quarterback factored in with Jalen Hurts here? How do you order the top three teams in the NFC right now?
Listen, before in the offseason when Minnesota was kind of making their moves, I said, watch out for Sam Darnold. This doesn't feel like an automatic plug and play for J.J. McCarthy. I think the injury played a lot of factor into the story. But Sam Darnold, man, I think he's going to become a very wealthy man in this offseason, and he has earned it. And he's a guy who's playing his best football of his career at the best moment for what is one of the best teams in the league. I've had the doubts about what you would get from him in a pressure-filled playoff scenario. And we're not quite there, but you can say this game against Green Bay was a playoff game. It might as well have been. Everything from here on out was a playoff game. And he's just showing up week after week after week. Kevin O'Connell's gotten the absolute best out of him. And he's playing with the most confidence that he's played with. Helps to have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison on the other end, but he's playing incredible football. given Detroit's injuries, and we're going to see this coming Sunday on Sunday Night Football. They just flexed the game. They just announced. We're going to see exactly what we get out of Sam Darnold. But, man, I'm ready to believe in the guy. He's earned this amazing second opportunity in the league, and I hope he cashes in.
Think about what Minnesota did. They signed him. They thought they're getting a bridge quarterback in Sam Darnold, a 1-year, $10 million deal. Now this guy's going to make $30 to $50 million next year. And quite honestly, Minnesota should be the team that gives it to him to get this run going as long as they can. Well, we do have a Monday night game. The Lions at the 49ers. 49ers playing obviously for nothing. Lions still dealing with injuries. They had the big game that will decide 1 and 5 as far as seeding next week with Minnesota. How do you see this game?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting game. I think, Dan Campbell's a culture guy, an attitude guy, and so they'll play the guys they need to play. Maybe you might see one guy like a Sewell, maybe a Goff get pulled early, knowing that there's just nothing for them to gain in this game, but they still have a way that they want to play, a style that they want to play. So I expect to see that. And listen, this was the NFC Championship matchup. There's still a lot of competitiveness in both of these teams. I think it's going to be a really fun game still. But yeah, Detroit they're not looking forward, but they understand what's at stake next week. So there will be a level of, hey, we're going to get what we need to get out of this game, keep our guys fresh, but keep everybody sharp for this playoff run that we're trying to go on. But ultimately, San Francisco's out of it, and they have to be smart about what they put into this game.
Putting a little bit of a bow on San Francisco, I think Jimmy Garoppolo's brother taking some shots at Kyle Shanahan on social media not too long ago. And the Wolves kind of circling for a team that definitely underachieved relative to their expectation, injury and otherwise. What's the path forward in your mind for San Francisco? We know they don't have to technically sign Brock Purdy to that long-term extension this offseason, but it seems like it's coming there. What do you see as the next iteration of a team that's been the NFC's representative for a while now?
Yeah, listen, this team since Kyle Shanahan has really been there and they've been hitting at their highest cylinder, this team has been, when we have our guys healthy in the positions that Kyle Shanahan signed them for and designed the offense around them for, they're the best team. We're top 2, top 3 in the league. But as soon as a guy like Trent Williams goes out for extended amount of time, Deebo Samuels, Christian McCaffrey, they're just not the same team. So I think there's got to be a level of, how do we draft and continue to develop where we are not so dependent on these superstars to be available for us to compete? Because injuries, as you've alluded to, senior and junior, are 100% in the league. There's no way to completely move around them. And so they've got to find a way to even out the parts of their team because when they're injured, they're just not the same. And then ultimately, if you're a San Francisco fan, go ahead and let Kyle Shanahan go and see how quickly he gets snatched up. Let's not do this thing where we act like he's just this subpar coach, and that's not true. And so, yes, they have things to correct. I think he and John Lynch have a good rapport, a good relationship. They'll get it figured out, but there's got to be a level of evening this roster out to give them competitive edges when things just don't go perfectly, because you get them in, again, one-game playoff scenarios. If they are 85 to 90% of who they are, you still give them a chance to win against anybody.
There's no doubt about it. That is a well-coached team and an organization that has generally been one of the healthiest, to the point where they could absorb moving multiple first-round draft picks to swing and miss on a quarterback in the first round and survive it and get Super Bowl appearances out of it on the other side here. Check them out tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern on the DraftKings Network as a part of the pregame power-up. Marshall, great to talk to you, man. We'll talk to you in 2025. Thank you so much.
Thanks, fellas. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Thanks, Marshall. Appreciate it. And Mike, it's how about the other side of it? How mad are the Giants fans? Not the Giants players, because they went out and got a win. The Giants fans. The Giants won the game and went from having the first pick in the draft to the 4th pick in the draft.
It is one of the weird parts about the end of the season where fan bases, like you said, not the team, but fan bases, your goals and aspirations start to change a little bit. And man, oh man, in a year where we've talked about it, there are no surefire number 1 overall, gotta have it quarterbacks in this draft. The idea that you might now have to pay up to a team like New England, who has got their dude and is currently sitting in that one spot right now, can kick their feet up Ben Affleck style and yell retainer and anybody who wants to come for that spot here. Coming up next, we'll talk about one of the decisions made for a quarterback that's in that number 1 conversation in a bowl game that involves eating Pop-Tarts. Dad, I have to say, overall, in a day and age where we know the college football landscape has changed so much, the 12-team playoff, the transfer portal, guys opting out of bowl games, it's made people ask a lot of questions about the viability of bowl season going forward. And I was even having that conversation with someone. I'd be curious to see coming off this season what TV ratings look like for these games. At some point, would we consolidate them? But man, across the board, there have been overtime games, plenty of entertaining shootouts here. Bowl season has felt like a success overall, and nowhere more so than the Pop-Tart Bowl performance that we got. Congratulations to Iowa State. I know some of their fans took umbrage with the way I worded a tweet, and I promise you, I have no slander towards your program whatsoever. I said that you should celebrate this like the national championship. It's because I think the Pop-Tart Bowl has carved out that kind of space for itself in the bowl landscape here. They get a 42-41 thrilling win over Miami in that game. That's going to be about some other stuff that we'll talk about, Dad. But for Rocco Becht, who is the MVP of this game, and for Iowa State, what an incredible season for them. We know not what they wanted as far as the ending and losing the Big 12 championship to Arizona State, who ends up representing the conference in the college football playoff. But a lot to be proud of here, and a really exciting game, which we've had a lot of. Bowl season, like I said, is like shopping at Costco. You're buying in bulk and hoping you get a hit every once in a while, and the Pop-Tarts Bowl remains box office stuff, including this game, Dad.
Yeah, it does. Listen, you need, with the bowl games having less and less meaning, you need the hook, you need the eye catcher, right? You need something to kind of tune in to see what's going to happen. And the Duke's Mayo Bowl had that, still has that, dumping the bucket of mayo on the winning coach. But the Pop-Tart Bowl has just taken over, and that's what the other bowl games has become, is marketing. And you hope you get a good game like you got here, but it's become how you market the bowl game, the trophy with the toaster on the top to toast the pastries. I mean, they are hitting on all cylinders.
Did you see, by the way, they had the toaster up in the booth? It was Tom Hart, Jordan Rodgers, and Cole Kublik on the call for this game. And in the booth, it shot the Pop-Tarts out live on camera at them with like force. They had to pick them up off the ground. So they engineered that trophy well with some velocity on that thing. But you're right, Dad. Top to bottom, this game to me is what the rest of bowl season can become if it chooses. In a day and age where you're wondering, is this more a celebration of the prior season or the start of the next season with the 15 practices you get? Why not turn it into anarchy? College football is an inherently dumb sport. And I say that as someone who loves it dearly and embraces all parts of that as the Mayo guy. But this game, Dad, you saw the Pop-Tart that got eaten alive last year. For anyone unfamiliar with this game literally sacrifices its mascot to the winning team at the end of the game. Last year, it was one preordained Pop-Tart and the strawberry Pop-Tart that was loaded into a gigantic toaster and then eaten alive by the winning team. This year, the MVP got to pick the flavor that was sacrificed here, so it drops down into the thing. All the while, the strawberry Pop-Tart that was eaten alive last year is watching from the stands. There's a memorial outside. Like, Dad, we understand this is all capitalism, but man, they made it feel fun along the way. And college football is inherently capitalistic. I mean, God, Fansville from Dr. Pepper is one of my favorite things ever, and I understand I'm being upsold. So to me, this is exactly what bowl season should continue to embrace. These insane sponsors, the tie-ins with the games, and teams that seem to genuinely enjoy the fact that as Iowa State's winning this game, you've got the Wildberry Pop-Tart getting buck wild with them in the huddle on the field.
Yeah, I mean, and the game MVP, Rocco Becht, got to pick the flavor that he wanted to eat, and he picked there's only one cinnamon roll. I mean, that was they intertwined themselves into the game. And quite honestly, that's the one I would have picked as well. It was either that or I think chocolate fudge was one of the choices as well. But I believe I would have gone with cinnamon roll as well. I thought that was a good selection by Rocco.
Yeah, I do want to pop this up here before we get to the conversation about Cam Ward in this game that I do think is really fascinating going forward with other players now, because we saw more guys, Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders both playing in their game where BYU absolutely waxed Colorado, by the way. But those guys opting to play in the game, the roll money plays in that and Cam Ward's decision. But our crew did make a great best Pop-Tart bracket that I want to throw up here right now. Some of the flavors, Dad, that you weren't even sure sure were real flavors going into this that got some love here, but I'm with you. The cinnamon roll as the addition into this year's bowl slate was phenomenal. I went out there and tried it. It's like the brown sugar cinnamon on steroids. It is well worth your time here. But as you look at this bracket, Dad, some really interesting and compelling matchup, including one frosted banana bread that I did not know existed.
Yeah. Did not know. That's sitting at the 15 seed. I did not know that existed. And quite honestly, I'm looking really quickly. There's only one unfrosted, and the unfrosted should automatically be the 16 seed. The 16 seed is a frosted grape, but anything that's frosted should be seeded higher than an unfrosted strawberry. That's just my opinion. But I'm with you. I personally did not know they had this many flavors out here. I absolutely didn't know frosted banana bread, but that has me salivating. I want to try that.
Yeah, Darius Butler over on the Pat McAfee show, one of the worst takes of all time, that the unfrosted Tart is his favorite choice out of the bunch. I don't know who hurt him, but he needs to find God in a hurry because that is an absolutely despicable take in a sea of these kind of Pop-Tarts available to you. I also think, for what it's worth, brown sugar cinnamon, the OG, underseeded at 4 right now in this bracket.
Yep,
but
agreed.
Hey, listen. The committee's got to stand by their decision. We'll talk to Alan Yates, the committee chairperson, coming up in a little bit here. But, Dad, in the meantime, let's get to the decision made by Cam Ward, who went into this game on the cusp of some impressive records and ended up passing them there. He threw for 3 touchdowns in the first half of this game, including the record-setting 156 that put him for the most all-time in Division I history, passing Houston's Case Keenum, who was there obviously 07 to 2011. Now, for Cam Ward, we know that this was a combination of his time at Incarnate Word, Washington State, and then here at Miami finishing. Now, he's also 3rd in yards in NCAA history behind Case Keenum and Dylan Gabriel, who actually has a chance to pass him coming up here in the college football playoff on this touchdowns record. But, Dad, he goes out here in the first half as what appeared to be part of the plan to play him for a half, to give him a shot at this record, and then sat in the second half in a game that was close, that Miami could have used him down the stretch of, and ultimately ends up losing by a point here. What was your opinion on this decision and how it ultimately played out for Cam Ward?
Oh, I have zero issue with it. Absolutely zero issue with him going for the record and then sitting. And Mario Cristobal, the coach, was asked about it after the game, about the decision. He said, all meetings with players and decisions like that, we made them in private. We keep them in private. So I'll prefer not to answer any questions as it relates to that. But I know he played his best while he was in there. That's just his way of saying I ain't talking about it. I have zero problem with it, Mike. Zero. Absolutely none. And I don't even care that it was brought up, that there was any kind of shaking their head or raise an eyebrow at it. I have zero issue with it. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, this is where we're at with these bowl games here. I understand some of the old guard who looks at this as a slight to your teammates or anything like that, but this is the way of the world now. There are plenty of guys making the decisions to not play in these games at all, and I'm sure everyone wanted that record. Cam Ward and what he has done for Miami football in 1 year this year, dragging this team to one of the best seasons in recent memory for them and instantly lifting everyone up here. I'm sure there are plenty of guys on that team who wanted to see him get the record at that point and get that opportunity, but also understood what he's got on the other side of this. Even in a day and age where these guys are being paid a king's ransom to play college football, it pales in comparison to the money that they are about to make at the next level as a likely first-round quarterback, the way that Cam Ward's expected to be. And so I always try and go and put myself in that vantage point, Dad, back in being a teammate. I was never the best guy on the team that I played on, but I had plenty of friends who went on to be first-round draft picks and who I saw the work they put in day to day to go out here and earn the opportunity to change their family's life forever. And again, that difference was more stark in the past where the dollar amounts weren't as overt and weren't as large as we're seeing now. But at the end of the day, I always, whether it was guys that wanted to transfer away for a better opportunity or looking ahead to the draft, it was always people over what happened as a result on the field for us there. I wanted to see the guys that I went to work with every day have that kind of success. And especially in a bowl game where, we're not playing for the national championship. As much as I joke about it and love the Pop-Tarts Bowl, you understand the things that are really important in the grand scheme of things here. And so as a teammate, I try and put myself back in those situations, and I would have had a hard time having sour feelings toward Cam Ward, provided that's a guy that you already liked, respected, got along with. There's always going to be that interpersonal stuff about how you feel about guys. But no, I have no problem with this. The one thing I do wish, Dad, is I wish Mario Cristobal would have said more. Now, I don't know if maybe that was something they agreed on there, but I think he could have provided a lot of cover in this situation by saying, hey, listen, Cam Ward has done a lot for this program. We had a plan because we wanted to give him the opportunity to try and go out here and get a record that means a lot to all of us here, but also wanted to protect his future there. Maybe they had conversations about keeping this all mums going forward, but that to me could have been the one thing that maybe assuaged some of the conversation and angst on the back end of this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And this was about Cam Ward's not getting hurt to get ready for the NFL, because there's the same decision in the NFL right now with Saquon Barkley, right? It's sure. Do you have him go for the rushing record, break Eric Dickerson's rushing record, and possibly get him hurt as you're one of the top teams in the NFL trying to make a playoff run? This truly has the team involved in it, where Cam Ward was more of a personal situation. So, and I have no problem either way if they try and get Barkley to go for it or if he sits. It should be known that Dillon Gabriel is 3 touchdowns behind Cam Ward. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't know playoff games counted, but Dillon Gabriel could play 3 more games. And those all, I believe those all will count. So he's going to pass Cam Ward. I would think that he would. And just to give some love to the other now, Cam Ward, top in Division I, the all-division NCAA record is John Mataka, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from Division II's Colorado School of the Mines. He set from 2019 to 23. He has 162 touchdowns. Tyson Bagent, the backup in Chicago, Division II Shepherd, he threw 159 touchdowns from 2018 to 2022. So there are some players ahead of Cam Ward. Braxton Plunk of Division III's Mount Union, 158. North Central's Luke Lennon, whose team will play in the Division III National Championship game next month, also has 158. So there are some players with more. But Dillon Gabriel, Mike, I didn't know all the playoff games counted. Now, I know the bowl games counted, so I guess I would understand why the playoff games counted, but Dillon Gabriel could be playing in 3 more games.
And listen, he's also playing in his 6th season. Like, all of these records are a little skewed because we've got the COVID years added onto this, the postseason's expanding. Like, college football's record books can have a very interesting time trying to translate this stuff across eras, across divisions. Like with everything else in college football, it's made unnecessarily difficult by the fact that no one's actually governing the sport. But it doesn't, I think, take any of the shine away from what Cam did, even if it is fleeting and Dillon ends up taking over this in a sea of bowl games where plenty of guys aren't playing because of opt-out. Plenty of guys don't play at all. I don't know what role the contracts that these guys have signed in terms of name, image, and likeness with the collectives play in keeping them on the field for X amount of time in the bowl game, or if there's any wiggle room. There's a lot we don't know about that. But I know we got to see Cam Ward for another half. And I know it probably had to hurt him on the sideline, sitting there in the 4th quarter, knowing he wasn't going to impact the outcome for his team. But this is a long-term approach. These guys have to think more like businessmen than ever before here. And so I'm not going to slight them for it. What I will say, Dad, and the dumbest part of this conversation by far, is anyone trying to act like NFL personnel are going to think for even a second about this decision in terms of their evaluation of Cam Ward.
And when you hear that, or when you hear a quarterback doesn't throw at the combine, the player personnel and the GMs don't like that. Give me a break. They don't care. It does not affect a quarterback's position one single bit. Not one. So you lose me with that argument. I completely agree.
Yeah, we've seen so many high-profile players opt out of these bowl games completely, and NFL teams not bat an eye. Now, for this quarterback class, we know that some of the pre-draft process may be a little more important for Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward this year because they are not surefire, highest-rated prospects the way we've seen with some of these prior classes. But I promise you, they're not going to think, oh, this guy's not a competitor because he decided to sit out the second half of the Pop-Tarts Bowl in the year of our Lord 2024. So anyone wanting to project their own virtue on that, I get it. For those of us that are lesser talents than a guy like Cam Ward will ever be, it sucks sometimes to see people be able to move in ways that you can't. But man, that is earned, not given. And so unfortunately, those are the breaks, and that's how this works, and that's how it's going to end up working for Cam Ward. So again, congratulations to Iowa State. Won 11 games for the first time in their school history and got to eat an anthropomorphic Pop-Tart on top of it all, because what more could you want out of the most wonderful time of the year?
You can envision the journey. What are the things you're envisioning right now?
I'm seeing when they first put on uniforms, when they first started. When I first started coaching them. The good, the bad, the indifference, the ups and downs. It's the journey. It's been a heck of a journey, and I'm thankful and I'm appreciative.
That was Colorado head coach Deion Sanders talking with sideline reporter Taylor McGregor before their game that they ultimately lose. And all credit to BYU, Kalani Sitake's program, who finished up the season with 11 wins and it looked great along the way at a bunch of different stops and gets the win there. But Dad, it's hard to ignore the cool father and son moment that we got for Deion Sanders, who I understand is polarizing, who has earned a bunch of the conversation around it, and a bunch of it is unearned, and a bunch of it is people that hate him for just existing in a space in a way that they're not comfortable with. But they went out and had a bunch of success this year. But the image of him getting to do the walk, and he's done this pregame walk before every game with his son Shiloh and Shador as they go out on the field and get ready to go, and knowing this was the last time there and seeing Deion overcome with that emotion was a pretty cool human moment for a guy that has seemed so larger than life in so many other ways.
Quite honestly, it's a normal moment for a parent. I mean, your mother and I did it with you and Jake, and even Sydney and her senior day swimming. I mean, we cried. I mean, and you think about all the time growing up in Little League, putting that uniform on the first time, for Sydney putting her swimsuit on and swimming starting at 6 years old. All that runs through your mind when you're just a parent. I know he's the coach of Colorado, and he's obviously a magnet to headlines. But there he was a dad. And so I can certainly relate to that as any parent who has walked their kid out in any sport on senior day and getting emotional about it. I certainly know that feeling.
Yeah, it is interesting. And senior day is always such an interesting thing. And this, while it's not senior day, was the last game that they knew for sure they were all going to be out there together. And it is having to try as a player to manage your emotions in a lot of those games. I got to go through 2 senior days, so I was good at it the second time around. And we were getting ready to play for a national championship that year. So it made it a lot easier to just enjoy all the good stuff and focus on the moment and get ready to play a football game after there. But it is interesting, Dad. He was a dad in that moment, but he even said at the end of that interview with Taylor that we didn't get to, he's like, man, I got to compose myself and go coach a darn football game. That is always something you've got to manage because it's outside of your normal routine. And you're thinking about all that stuff when you've got all these responsibilities there. So it was really cool to see Deion let his guard down a little bit there for a guy that is the consummate showman, is a media mogul in addition to being a really successful coach, and obviously has, his son in Shiloh, who's played ball on the defensive side of the ball, Shador, who's going to go on and be in conversation for the overall pick. In that moment, to let his guard down, I thought was a pretty cool thing for everyone to get to see there. Good job by Taylor in the interview as well. A little bit of college football news here this morning, Dad, before we move on to the NFL versus NBA Christmas Day phenomenon. Brett McMurphy reporting that apparently there will be in-depth discussions about not guaranteeing the conference champs the top 4 spots in the college football playoff come 2025. He said the top 5 conference champs would still get in the playoff, but rankings would determine seeds, according to the sources. This would require unanimous approval by all stakeholders to change in 2025, but conference commissioners are, quote, open to getting the seeding right. So it seems like the chief complaint from this year, Dad, already in the process of getting remedied towards next year, where again, we said, hey, it's fine if you want to give the top 5 highest ranked conference champions an auto bid into the 12-team field, where you would have still had a team like Clemson being a bid thief going from 16 up until the top 12, but it would avoid the situation where we have now, where you look at a team like Oregon having to play Ohio State in the quarterfinals, Boise State and Arizona State getting the top seeds over higher ranked teams in a way that seemed counterintuitive to a lot of people, even if you understood the intention. So I think this is the right move, and I'm glad to hear they're working on making this right by next year.
Oh, this is absolutely the right move, and this is a move that should happen absolutely immediately for next year, because you had a 12-seed Arizona State by college ranking as the 4-seed with a bye, and a 9-seed Boise State with a 3-seed with a bye. You just rank the top 12. Conference champs are in. I completely agree with that. But then you just go by ranking and seed it that way. So that should be a no-brainer right out of the gate, without question.
Completely agree. So it's good that they're working on that right now and trying to find ways to change and adapt in a very new process here. Very new process, Dad, for people on the professional level. Let's talk a little bit about this. What was your impression of the NFL on Christmas Day this year? We know the NFL had played on Christmas Day before, but this time it was in the middle of the week. They went out of their way to schedule games on here, and they did so with yet another new streaming partner. Amazon's own Thursday night now for a couple of years, but the NFL partnering with Netflix for 2 Christmas Day games that included a Beyonce halftime performance and all the bells and whistles around it, going up against the NBA on Christmas Day slate that did better than it's done in a while. Big bump in numbers for the NBA on Christmas Day as LeBron and Steph played a barn burner of a game. Victor Wembanyama in the early window here. What do you make of what seems to be almost a competition among these leagues for this holiday that's always belonged to the NBA?
Well, that it's not a competition. I mean, I know LeBron said, I love the NFL, and but the Christmas is our day. Sorry, LeBron, it's not. I mean, it's just not. Yeah, I mean, their game with Golden State drew 5 million. Each game drew, what, 24, 25 million on Netflix? And Netflix had to be breathing a sigh of relief because of all the trouble they had with the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight. You know, they had to be going, oh God, we better figure this out.
Yeah.
And they did. You know, all the talent they brought in from across the different networks, it all seemed to work. You know, there was no buffering situation going on, and tons of people watched it. Listen, the NFL is king. There's no competition with any other sport. There's none. And I believe now the only day the NFL hasn't had a scheduled game is Tuesday. I think a game has been played on Tuesday because of weather and a Monday night or got moved or something. I could be wrong about that, but there's never been one scheduled on a Tuesday. They've now scheduled every day of the week, but because Christmas was on a Wednesday and there were the 2 scheduled games. There's no sense in having the competition of who owned the day. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a former NFL player. The numbers bear it out. You just have to show the numbers. I mean, it's not even a competition. It doesn't mean you don't. I didn't check in. There were 2 NFL games and 5 NBA games. I certainly watched some of them. But as far as who's watching and who's tuning in, I mean, come on. It's not a competition at all.
No, and I don't think we need to make it one. Like, I think what we learned from this Christmas is there's enough to go around for everyone. Like, the NBA had its best Christmas day since 2019 in terms of ratings, and the games were really good. Like, all the conversation about the NBA ratings from the beginning of the season, I always thought were stupid. The league's in a fine place. You've got a bunch of young budding stars. You've still got some of your old stars hanging around. Clearly, LeBron and Steph can still every once in a while tap back into the magic elixir that makes really fun basketball to watch here. The product's still good. Some of the regular season stuff we can out, but the in-season tournament's gone well, and I think the league's in good hands going forward. That, to me, is what Christmas Day proved, because you're right. Making this some sort of, culture war among the leagues of fans wanting to beat their chest, because to me, that's all ratings conversations really are. None of us are TV executives, so sitting around here, it's just an ego trip. It's wanting to be able to say, oh, look at how good my league is. Look at how much people like my stuff. And there's always, I think, some inherent competition to it, but this nation's football addicted. It's been for a long time here, and no matter what day you put it on, it's going to rate higher than anything else you do in that slot, no matter what platform it's on. We could talk about the streaming wars and how it's going to affect fans going forward, but people have shown wherever you put football, they're going to go and watch it. But the NBA on Christmas Day this year also did prove that tales of their demise from early in the season or some of these existential crises might be a little bit overblown. If you still get big stars on the court for big games and they wind up being good, people are going to tune in and watch. That's a little harder to game going forward in 2024 into 2025 because we know people got options, a la Netflix jumping into all of this. But I think this is kind of the reminder that everyone can eat. This is not a competition, but it also need not be. So congratulations to everybody for getting to be able to walk into their board meetings at the start of 2025 and point to some exciting new numbers so they can all continue to line their pockets at the ownership levels. We will continue to finish off the shows the way we always do with this, that, and the third and some DuckTales next. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of the day. Download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Leave it a 5-star rating. And check us out live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Same damn time, same damn place as we transition 2024 to 2025 this week. You can subscribe to our GoJo and Golic page on YouTube as well. Hit the bell there so that you're up to date anytime we go live on the show. Shout out to our great guest, Marshall Newhouse, NFL veteran offensive tackle and Super Bowl champ, kind enough to join us to preview Monday Night Football and react to everything that we saw this weekend. If you missed that, check it out wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show, which, Dad, I'm sure can't come soon enough for the people around me in this hotel here. The wall's not very thin, and so I hope the people in the adjoining rooms are sports talk radio fans, because if not, they are just being woken up very early in Miami for a Monday morning.
And listen, you started the Miami's Eastern time, so at least you started at 8. I was after a game on the West Coast. I think it might have been in Seattle, where I did the show the next day. It was 5 a.m. when I started the show, and somebody was actually banging on the wall and then banging on my door during a segment, trying to basically tell me to shut up. And we were during a segment, so I couldn't answer it. I wasn't going to answer it anyway. But, oh, yeah, they were banging on the wall, and then it made it all the way to banging on my door for me to shut the hell up. At least you're starting at 8. The show started at 8 Eastern in Miami, not 5 o'clock Pacific time.
That's a fair point. And everyone in this hotel is used to some interesting sounds. Walking down the hallway the other day, I heard some people, we'll call it making whoopee in their room pretty loudly in a way that the whole hallway got to hear there. So for me, this is at the very least something wholesome that the kids can enjoy walking by in the hallway, and not a little more adult themed content that might be going to each their own inside their own hotel room among consenting adults. Go with God, love wins. But at the same time, I don't feel as bad about barking takes about Sam Darnold and his great season here, or getting to this, that, and the third, Dad. And let's start off with this, as we've got Caitlin Clark continuing to just rack up different accolades. This time, just her likeness here. Caitlin Clark's WNBA cards just sold at auction for $219,906. The Clark cards, which is hard to say, accounted for $216,000 of the sale there. And Dad, it just continues to show everything she touches turns to gold at this point here. The Times Athlete of the Year, I believe, was the official title there. So all of this in an off season where we know she's not going to play in the new 3-on-3 league that's forming for women's basketball here, but I'm sure gearing up for season 2, Dad. We haven't talked enough about what the expectations for season 2 of Caitlin Clark are going to look like in the WNBA, knowing that by the end of the year, she was playing at an all-star level. She was on a team that ended up making it into the postseason, but it is now going to come in, I'm sure, with legitimate preseason MVP buzz. That's before we get to next time around with the Olympic roster and the expectations. So it's only going to get louder for a player who's made such an impact in year 1.
Yeah, without a doubt. You mentioned the cards. I think there were 7 cards total sold, and 5 of hers, as you said, accumulated for over $216,000 of the $219,000. And you're right. It's also going to be for her team, right? The Indiana Fever of having maybe a higher placement going into the playoffs and making a move in the playoffs, because that's ultimately, this is a team game. So she's going to garner some individual accolades, which she already has. I get it. But this is a team game, and to tell how well drafts go for a team is how well the team does, right? So her Indiana Fever, they need to keep, go a little further than last year, and eventually, hopefully for them, compete for a WNBA title. That will tell the true, not just of her, of their draft classes.
Yeah, no, we're about to rings plus minus the hell out of her sooner than later, based on the expectations for someone who's already one of the biggest stars on planet Earth. Dad, speaking of stars, let's get to that. The Pro Football Hall of Fame announced its 2025 Hall of Fame finalists. The 15 finalists in order: Eric Allen, your former teammate, Jared Allen, Willie Anderson, Jari Evans, Antonio Gates, Torrey Holt, Luke Kuechly, Eli Manning, Steve Smith Sr., Terrell Suggs, Fred Taylor, Adam Vinatieri, Reggie Wayne, Darren Woodson, and Marshall Yanda. So a lot of the names we've talked about in the lead up to this, Dad, here, certainly guys we're happy to see. I know EA is a guy that you're fired up to see getting an opportunity to once again have that knock on the door for him to get one of those gold jackets. But this a really stellar group here that I know most people are going to be focused on on the Eli Manning of it, but man, between the wide receivers in here, Antonio Gates, who I think should be a lock in this offensive line class potentially loading up here, there's some really star-studded names that were the guys from my youth that stood out.
Yeah, I mean, 3 offensive linemen in the final 15, Willie Anderson, Jari Evans, and Marshall Yanda. So all 3 aren't going to get in. I hope at least one of them gets in. And I had thought Marshall Yanda should be the guy, but he's the newest of the 3. I think Luke Kuechly should be a lock. He's a first-timer. I do think Antonio Gates should be a lock as well. Terrell Suggs up there. Adam Vinatieri, I mean, they have to start opening up to more kickers and special teamers. We saw a returner in Devin Hester, but more kickers and actual special team players as well. I think the voters need to get their heads out of their you-know-whats and start acknowledging the special teams portion of the NFL and give them their due. So congrats to all for making the final 15. I certainly have a special place in my heart for hopefully Eric Allen, my former teammate, as you mentioned, in Philly, gets in. But good luck to all of them.
Yeah, I know it's for a lot of these guys can be an exhausting process, especially if you keep getting close and not getting over the hump. But man, what an incredible thing to see your name amongst this group of players and mentioned alongside so many of the others potentially joining the Hall of Fame for a sport that's near and dear to so many. So I'm with you. Going to be exciting to see who from this class ultimately gets the call up. I'm with you. Kuechly, Antonio Gates, I bang the drum for. I think Jari Evans could be the guy this year for the offensive line that gets it. To your point, Yanda New, a little bit backlogged along the interior there. And Adam Vinatieri, just do it. If you're not going to do it for that guy who's got all of the, like, again, the stock line everyone uses, can you tell the story of football without it? You can't tell the story of the early Patriots dynasty and their postseason runs without a bunch of snowy kick footage from Adam Vinatieri.
So the big question, is going to be, there's only one quarterback in the final 15, and it's Eli Manning, and it's in his first year. I have said I believe he gets in the Hall of Fame, but not in the first year. What do you think?
I don't think he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer based on the totality of the career. I understand that because of the market, because of so many things and the postseason accolades, he might, but I think he's a Hall of Famer. I don't think in the spirit of what we think of a first ballot Hall of Famer is, though, that Eli Manning is a first ballot Hall of Famer. So, and I don't think that's a huge slight, like saying the guy deserves to wear a gold jacket just maybe next year isn't the worst thing you can say about a person, but I agree with you completely on that front here. Speaking of things that are long overdue, Dad, let's get to the third here. 50 years after a man who grew up in suburban Detroit left town, he finally decided to try and take the opportunity to return an overdue library baseball book. Chuck Hildebrandt, 63 years old in Chicago, visited the public library in Warren while in town for Thanksgiving, carrying a book titled Baseball's Zaniest Stars that he borrowed back as a 13-year-old boy in 1974 and tried to return it. They told him he can keep the book here, Dad, which sets a really dangerous precedent that if you want to go and get out of paying library dues, all you need to do is steal it for long enough, apparently.
Yeah. They said you can keep it and no fine. I mean, it would have been something if they said, hey, you can keep it, but you got to pay X amount, and he could have decided if he wanted to do it or not. But yeah, because now where's the line, right? You're gonna point to Chuck as the precedent if you try and return a book to a library. And so where is the line? I mean, how many years overdue does it have to be? What does the fine amount have to be where you waive it or you take it? That's a tough call.
It makes me worried because I wonder if libraries are getting desperate right now. I don't know the state of public libraries in 2024. I don't know how well they're doing. I know we have these conversations about bookstores and just reading all the time, but with the advent of Kindles and everything else, like, are libraries doing okay? Are kids that have to do research for projects enough of a draw to keep the lights on for these? I don't know, because this does make libraries seem a little desperate, where someone comes back and you're just so happy to have them in your doors, you don't even charge them so that you can get a little bit of press right here. So I don't know, man. I'm worried about that one. Kids, don't go out and rob libraries this holiday season here.
No.
That's not where you want to be when Jesus comes back. It's certainly not how you want to start your new year, and it's certainly not the example we want to set. Instead of stealing books from the library, head on over to the audio library. Download, subscribe, rate, review this show. Leave it a 5-star rating and check it out live Monday through Friday, every day from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.